Well, big ruling out of Pennsylvania today, or maybe it was late yesterday, I can't really remember which, in favor of Donald Trump and his campaign and their legal efforts, although it wasn't a case that they brought. It was the case brought by Mike Kelly and Sean Parnell over the constitutionality of the mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania. They essentially, I don't really know the details too much because I don't think it's really useful to get into the details of it, but the angle they're taking is that under the Pennsylvania state constitution, the way that the mail-in ballot system was implemented in this election was unconstitutional, illegal, and so therefore you can't really certify these election results. And that the judge that just ruled, now it wasn't a supreme, well, I'll get into that. The judge who just ruled agreed with them and said, yeah, we can't certify these results, which means that if you can't certify the results of the election, the state legislature just picks their own electors. More on that in a minute. But this ruling is not final, because this ruling will, of course, be appealed by the losing side, and it will go to the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. Pennsylvania Supreme Court is controlled heavily by Democrats, and they will not let this ruling stand. Now, what I've seen is some conflicting people saying, well, then it'll just be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that, of course, should favor the president. He appointed 3 of the 9 people on the Supreme Court currently, and it is considered to be a 5-4 conservative court. But from what I'm hearing, and again, this is hard because I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know who's right here. There's also people saying that the final ruling on this case is going to come from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court because it's on it is a issue pertaining only to the Pennsylvania Constitution, and the U.S. Supreme Court does not rule on the constitutionality of laws within the framework of a state constitution. That's what a state's Supreme Court is for. And so the U.S. Supreme Court does not interpret state Supreme Courts. That's not their role. And that seems to make sense to me. I've never heard of a case where the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled on the constitutionality of a law with regards to that a state's given constitution. They always rule whether or not it's constitutional based on the federal constitution, and that gets into incorporation doctrine and things, which I don't believe in incorporation doctrine personally. There are certain, I'm not a lawyer, but I mean there are certain aspects of constitutional law where a layman such as myself does have opinions. For example, I disagree with people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who essentially thinks that the Second Amendment doesn't mean that individuals have a right to bear arms. I think I can safely disagree with that without being a lawyer. And so, based on based on what I've seen, I'm fairly certain that what will end up happening with this case is that the ultimate it will ultimately die in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court because they're not going to rule in favor of these guys. Now, the opinion of this judge, this lower court judge who sided with them, seems to contradict what I just said, because he, in his opinion, essentially wrote that he thinks that they will end up winning their case as it works its way up the chain of the courts. And so I'm, perfectly happy saying that I don't know all the details here. I don't know everything, so I can't predict things perfectly. But I'm personally not getting. I'm not too optimistic about this because from what I've seen, it looks like it's going to end up dying at some point. Because again, if this election should teach a lot of people that the courts are not these. They're not these all-knowing, neutral oracles who are just there to divine the truth. Judges are as political as our politicians. And so if you get yourself in front of a Democratic judge and say, hey, these Democrat election officials kicked our observers out, or they kept our observers so far away that we couldn't actually see what was being done, they'll say, well, if your guys were in the same room as as where the count was going on, that counts as observation. You were there, you observed. Sure, you couldn't see anything, you couldn't meaningfully observe. But the law doesn't say you have to meaningfully observe; it just says you have to observe. That sort of hackery is not what you get from some kind of neutral third-party arbiter. Now, moving on to the issue of that I touched upon earlier of the Pennsylvania legislature picking their own delegates to the Electoral College, which would be the ultimate remedy if the election results can't be certified because it's blocked by the court because a bunch of unconstitutional ballots were in the mix here. The Pennsylvania legislature, that Doug Mastriano guy who was banned from Twitter, who led that public hearing sort of thing, quasi-hearing I guess I'm calling it, because again it wasn't actually at the Pennsylvania State Senate chambers, but leaving that aside, he has announced today that they're filing I guess they call it a resolution to block the certification and to take back the power from the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania and to appoint the electors, because the power of how to select the electors constitutionally in the federal Constitution is delegated to state legislatures, and the state legislatures write the election law and say, hey, we're going to hold an election. Whoever wins that election, the Secretary of State then has to pick a slate of electors to support that person. And so that power is delegated to the Secretary of State by the state legislature. And so what this Mastriano senator guy is trying to do is take that power back and to say that, no, these election results are not accurate. They are rigged. And so you cannot appoint a slate of electors to vote for Joe Biden. Now, this is good news because it means that some Pennsylvania Republicans are making the right decision. But so far, we haven't seen the GOP leadership in Pennsylvania take up the same sort of language. This Doug Mastriano guy is not the majority leader of the state Senate. He's not the Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania. So I guess if you live in Pennsylvania, you should be all pressuring your, if you support this sort of thing, pressure your state representative and your state legislator, or your state senator, so all of your state legislators, to support this, and that, hey, if you aren't going to preserve the integrity of the presidential election, I'm not going to bother voting for you next time around, because how can I even know that my vote for you is going to be counted if my vote for Trump didn't matter? That sort of thing. Because currently, I don't think that the Republican majority in these various states where they do control the legislatures, I don't think they're feeling the pressure so much. I think they feel like they can just ride this out, wait for Biden to be in office, and things will just go back to normal, and they won't have any consequences. The only way these state Republican parties are going to try and actually stop the election where it looks like there were enough invalid ballots to make a difference, the only way that they're going to make the jump and actually try and stop this is if they feel the heat. And again, I just haven't seen that yet. Those public hearing things, I think, were a part of that. It's waking up the public, and then the public waking up will put pressure on the politicians. And frankly, at this point, I'm not even really concerned about, oh, well, Trump has to, invalidate the results in X amount of states so that Biden gets below 270 and they can throw it to the House and he win. Frankly, at this point, the stonewalling has been so severe. The judicial malfeasance has been so severe that I'm not even looking at this point for a Trump win, because the game's not fair. If the game was fair, he would have won to begin with. That seems pretty clear to me by this point, by the number of irregularities that occurred. And if our judicial system was fair, they would have at least gotten a hearing. In all of these cases, the judges, for the most part, just throw these lawsuits out saying that, whoever the plaintiff is doesn't have standing. And so they're not even letting these people have their day in court when there are very clear and obvious problems that need to be adjudicated here. And so if our court system is totally corrupt, well then, I don't think it's realistic to think that Trump could win the cases where he deserves to win them in these various states, and therefore knock Biden's total down below 270 so that it gets thrown to the House. At this point, I'm just hoping that he wins any of these state challenges and validates some states so that he can have it, clearly on the record that, hey, we now know for a fact, even the courts agree, that the election was rigged in this state. And we're saying these same we're seeing these same patterns in all these other states, and so the election clearly wasn't fair. I want everything to be done possible to make sure that, if not an outright majority, at least a strong plurality, over 40% of Americans, know and believe and have the facts to back it up that this election was neither free nor fair, and that Joe Biden did not win a fair election. I mean, this is a clear-cut case of selected, not elected, if I've ever seen it. Now, coming up next week, I believe Monday, they're going to have a similar sort of hearing thing like they had in Pennsylvania and Arizona, and I intend on doing that in Nevada and Georgia and Michigan and Wisconsin. This is all very good. The news coming out of the Wisconsin recount is essentially that in Dane County, things seem to be going well, and they're doing things properly, I believe, but Milwaukee County is totally stonewalling, not allowing proper observation. Lots of ballots are being challenged, and apparently not a lot's being done about it. Of course, the Democratic response is that the Trump people are just challenging any old ballot, and they're being totally unreasonable, and they're just trying to gum up the system. Obviously, I don't know if that's true or not, but I would tend to, at this point, side with the Trump people if they're saying that there's problems, because the numbers coming out of Milwaukee did not pass the smell test initially. And so I think it's important that the Trump campaign, goes on the record and they present and they throw everything they have and give it to the, present their case in the court of public opinion. Let people know what exactly it is that they allege went on. Now, of course, in Nevada, something I'm very much looking forward to, there's one judge there who finally decided to let the Trump campaign have an evidentiary hearing where they can actually present their case in a court of law. This has not happened anywhere else. All these other cases just get dismissed, which is just the judge's way of saying that no, we're not even going to hear you make your case. You're not allowed to make it, period. Not in this court. Get out. And so by being given the opportunity to at least present their evidence in Nevada, they could get somewhat of a shake. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's going to be a fair shake, but it's going to be there's going to be some trial, some semblance of a trial. So I think there's still a lot to stay tuned to when it comes to this whole process. I do not think that it will be over anytime soon. And of course, that December 3rd date is eerily close to December 8th. So there's December 8th, of course, being the safe harbor date for when states have to have their election contests wrapped up in order for their electors to be actually admitted to the Electoral College. So if you have states to where they haven't selected electors by that date, they are not going to be a part of the Electoral College. So we should know by then who has their delegates in line and who doesn't. That will be essentially the final. That'll be the final curtain call, and we should know pretty much what's going to happen by then. Now again, I feel bad, but this is another day I didn't get a chance to talk about all the stuff going on in the rest of the world, but I guess I'll try and squeeze that in tomorrow. But then, we had this big Pennsylvania news, so I felt like I had to talk about that. But anyway, if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.